We want you guys to start with dreams and curiosity, not with numbers and spreadsheets.
The short-term goal is going to be to start having a written plan for your money.
And so we had to really work together to learn how do we enjoy our money. Welcome back to the Fiscal Clinician Podcast, where we empower healthcare professionals to build wealth, crush debt, and achieve financial independence. I'm Josh, financial coach and owner of Fiscal Clinician.
And I'm Devon McCord, your co-host and owner of Health and Wealth Hawaii. We're both physical therapists turned financial coaches, and we're on a mission to help healthcare professionals take control of their money and build a debt-free lifestyle. And let's be real, money, it's psychological, it's emotional, and it impacts every part of our lives.
Yeah, it totally does. And today's episode is all about budgeting, the B word. Sometimes it's a good connotation, sometimes it's bad. We want to talk about our thoughts about all of it. And before we get things started off today, let's talk about some budgeting mistakes we've made in the past. And so I can start things off. So my worst mistakes with money was being a super mega saver. I saved way too much and didn't let myself enjoy the money that we worked so hard to make. And this eventually led into my wife and I's marriage. We were so different, where she was more of a spender. I was a crazy saver and a bit of a tightwad. And so we had to really work together to learn how do we enjoy our money. And at Fiscal Clinician, we want you guys to be able to be responsible and be good savers, but also be able to enjoy your money. What about you though, Devon? Any specific things come to mind?
Initially, when I moved to Hawaii, my wife and I were looking at purchasing a condo, and the homeowner association fees at the time were about $400 a month. And we took that into calculations, but we didn't take into calculations the increases that would happen over time over the many years. And now we look at it and the HOA fees are around $800 a month, which is double over the course of a 6-year time frame or so.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. And this could be a whole episode, but with housing, a lot of people like to compare rent and owning a home, apples to apples. But if you have $2,500 in rent versus a $2,500 mortgage with HOA and with other things, whether a water heater goes out or things go wrong, it's often sometimes 10, 20% more expensive just owning a home. So that's definitely a big thing to keep in mind. So, well, to start us off here, we want to talk about budgeting and having a plan and how having a plan gives you freedom. Now, we know the word budget often doesn't instill warm and fuzzy feelings. It often instills some anxiety or restrictions and things like that. But we actually believe the opposite. A budget is what gives you freedom and margin. It's how you create your dream life so you can take that dream vacation, so that you can book the spa or the massage, or that you can spend on whatever things you love. And this is what we want for you guys, to be able to spend on things that you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly, Josh. And we know that money habits are associated with our behavior. And the current world has programmed us to constantly spend. And a big important part of this podcast is making sure that you are recognizing your spending habits, your unacknowledged debt that goes over your head every day that you just put to a side. The short-term goal is going to be to start having a written plan for your money. And the long-term plan is to live off that money that you've saved. So you push that into investments so you can stream a steady cash flow, which should help your living expenses. That's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate freedom. So our focus in today's episode, we're going to cover how to begin writing down a basic monthly budget that is easy to follow and will greatly help you with changing your money behaviors.
So the big question is, how do we even start, right? And our plan is inspired by Ramit Sethi's conscious spending plan. He has some amazing resources, and we've used his structure to create our own with some small tweaks and changes. However, the biggest difference between him and us is we tend to be more aggressive when it comes to paying off debts, and we'll explain this in the tactics that we go into. But before diving into the numbers and the spreadsheets, we want you guys to start with dreams and curiosity, not with numbers and spreadsheets. So if you're working with a spouse or a partner, ask them, what's your dream vacation? What money memories shaped you growing up? And was money seen in your family as positive, negative, stressful, fun? And the other big thing, what do you love spending money on that makes you really happy? Because budgeting isn't a math problem initially anyway. It's behavior and relationship primarily. And so nerds of the relationship, just like me and Devon, do not make the same mistake. At least I'll speak for myself. I did with my wife by jumping straight into the spreadsheet, but please Talk to each other about your dreams, your goals, so you can come together. And then after that, you start talking about the numbers. If you're single, I want you to do the same thing, just asking yourself, what do I love spending money on?
Yeah, exactly, man. The first thing we're look at is always making sure you're recognizing your spending behaviors. Once you've recognized your money behaviors and your relationship with money, you can begin your foundation of starting to run the numbers on a spreadsheet. So in this next segment, we're going to break down your budget into four major categories that anyone can use. And then we will further discuss our 3 steps to build wealth and crush debt so you can truly be financially free. So, breaking down these 4 categories, the 4 categories are going to be fixed costs, long term investments, short term savings, and guilt free spending. And now that we are aware of these 4 major categories, we're going to start by one of the biggest categories, which is fixed costs. Rent, mortgage, groceries, minimum car payments, minimum credit card payments. These are all part of that 50 to 60% of your fixed cost. So, for example, if you have, let's say, a paycheck that's coming in of around $5,000 per month, right? If you take 50% of that, it's $2,500. So that's 2 weeks of your working pay. And so that's a big part of your overall budget planning. And so when you take a look at that, you need to start to look at, okay, what are some sacrifices we can make? Maybe we don't need a 2 bedroom. Maybe we just need a 1 bedroom place. And so these are little things that we want you to take into consideration as we just start to develop the budget. And Josh is going to go over some of the short-term savings plans.
Yeah, so first we've got those fixed costs, right? And we said we want those to be around 50 to 60% of your take home pay. And that's after taxes, right? And then the second one is short term savings. Now, before we get there, I want to talk about ways to cut expenses in your fixed costs. One sacrifice could be, like he was talking about, even downgrading in your house. Maybe it's going from a 2 bedroom to a 1 bedroom. Or maybe another question you could ask yourself is, how much is my car payment? Because in these fixed cost areas, we also have debt payments, minimum debt payments, credit cards, cars, and maybe your car is taking up a huge amount of your fixed costs. And so another question would be, does it make sense for us to downgrade in cars? Maybe you have a new car or just a car that's killing you as far as payments, whether it's a nice truck, a nice big SUV. And so is it possible for you to cut down and downgrade cars? Now, the next thing, like we said, is short-term savings. We want this to be around 5 to 10% of what you're putting away and of your budget each month. This normally contributes of your emergency fund, your vacation savings, and down payments on a house. Now, if you guys don't have an emergency fund, we would definitely recommend saving aggressively for this first. So instead of saving for vacation, down payment for a house, first make sure you have an emergency fund. Having an emergency fund is really vital because it's not a question of if something happens, but when, whether it's your car breaking down, having a family emergency. And we'll do a whole episode on emergency funds. But for now, just make sure that you're building up a short term savings for an emergency fund. Now, the other big thing is automating it, making sure that your emergency fund is getting pulled out monthly. If you start saving for it that way, you can have a separate savings account with your bank account, having it pull money from your checking account monthly. But we would definitely recommend having that emergency fund in a different bank account, a different savings account, because then if you have it in your checking account, it's way too tempting to just spend that money on a non-emergency situation.
Yeah, I completely agree. Short-term savings is your second step, right? Because if you don't have that emergency fund sitting over there in your high yield savings account on the side, you're going to spend it. And you really can't put your money in emergency in a long-term investment because you cannot get it out as fast. You can't pull that liquidity, that cash in a quick way. If you need it right now, it cannot be in a long-term investment, okay? So moving on to discuss a little bit further is long-term investments. So long-term investments, we are coupling a couple different categories or accounts into this long-term investment category. Normally, we want to use 10 to 15% of that pie for long-term investments. And these long-term investments can include your 401ks and your individual retirement accounts, which are your Roth individual account or your traditional individual account. And for those that are asking what are the differences, what is a 401k? What is a Roth and a traditional? I just want our audience to think 401k is your employer. You cannot just grab a 401k off Schwab, Fidelity. This comes from your employer, and it's a benefit that your employer is offering you as part of their negotiation of your salary. So they're completely separate, and we just want to make sure everybody's aware of that because our 401k has a match, and it's usually a 4 to 5% of your money, right?
And then an IRA, an individual retirement account, that's something completely separate you could open on your own. You could have both, but the big thing is IRA is separate from your work.
Me and Josh were definitely a little bit more aggressive with paying off the debt compared to Remit Safety. If you're still paying off debt, we recommend only contributing up to your 401k match. And that money could be going towards paying off debt that has a high interest of like 15 to 30%. It's going to keep sucking your money a lot faster. So we need to pay that off first. I've also developed a chart to help all of our listeners to see how money should flow from your initial check to checking to savings accounts and then to other alternative accounts. And if you want that, you can find me at Health and Wealth Hawaii Instagram. Just shoot me a message and I'll be able to gladly send that to you for free. And our next category we're going to be talking about is more of the fun one, is guilt-free spending. So Josh, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, and just an overview from the last section here. Again, a lot of this gets really confusing, but if you don't have that match, that 4 to 5% match with your company, we still encourage you to contribute a little bit into an IRA, even if it's around that 4 to 5%. And again, the reason we're only contributing 4 or 5% is we want you to get rid of that debt as fast as possible, just because it's so nice to be able to have the breathing room to say, I don't owe anyone anything. And now, so moving on to guilt-free spending, this can be around 20 to 30% of your spending if you're out of debt. Now, what we recommend is if you're still paying off your debt, we do recommend going down to 10%. So you're still getting some room to spend on what you love, but you're cutting basically spending on eating out, travel, self-care, fitness, things like that. You're cutting that down a little bit just so you can have more of a laser focus on the debt. Again, we want you guys to enjoy your money. My wife and I love to eat out, go on great vacations. Part of our guilt-free spending is set aside for unforgettable experiences. When we're in Hawaii, we got to take a trip to Japan, which we will never forget. That was like one of our best experiences ever. And then we got to do a lot of island hopping in Hawaii too. And so we want you guys to enjoy your money. We want you to spend your money. But again, it's a huge priority trying to get rid of the debt too. So then debt isn't stealing from your future. And so the intensity of our debt payoff plan is a little bit different from Remit Sadie, just because we do tend to be more aggressive. But even if you're making that $5,000 a month, then that's, if we do 10%, that's still $500 going towards eating out, travel expenses, gym memberships, whatever you want, right? And so we don't want you to go scorched earth, but we do want to stop debt from stealing from your future. So the next section is the 3 practical steps to build freedom in your finances. So Devin, take it away.
Yeah, so now that we've discussed the 4 categories of the budget, we want to estimate how much you're spending in each category. The first thing we're going to look at is step 1, which is guesstimate and take a break. So we want you to go back into these 4 categories. We want you to estimate your income and then all your spending habits and write down all these into a category. Start by just putting them into a category and find out where you're missing. Maybe you don't have any short-term savings. Maybe you don't have any long-term savings. Maybe 50% of your money is in guilt-free spending, right? We need to look at those and start to put them into categories so we can start to even just see where the money's at, right? Because if you can't see it, you're not controlling it. So Josh, go ahead and move into step 2.
Yeah, and guys, this guesstimate is exactly that, a guess, right? You're guessing to your best of your abilities, how much do we spend on fixed cost? How much do we put into short and long-term savings or investments? And how much are we spending on guilt-free spending? I would definitely recommend rounding up a little bit, just because you're probably going to lowball some of this. And again, at the end of the day, it's better to just have more categorized than you think than less. Now, before you move on to the next step, schedule your next time of when you're going to take a look at your money. But now give yourself a hand for taking this first step of guessing your income and your expenses and walk away from it. Don't look at it for the rest of the day. Now, nerds, you are going to be tempted to go through everything right now. Because I know you, because I am one. And again, whichever either partner or if it's you by yourself, if you're tempted to just be like, I want to go through all of this, if it's going to make you happy and you're by yourself, go for it. If it's a couple, you are definitely going to irritate your spouse. And so just take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush through everything and plan for those next times for step two. And step two is pulling your credit and debit card statements from 2 different months. We want you to take a normal month and a higher spending month. Oftentimes, for people, December, for example, like Christmas time, is a higher spending month, whether that's them traveling, buying gifts, whatever it looks like. Maybe you have a summer trip or something that's normally more expensive. The big thing is we want an average. So we want you to take a normal month of spending and a higher month of spending and average those out. This is where you're going to be going back through your statements, your checking account, debit cards, credit cards, and you're adding them up and categorizing. For fixed costs, you're adding up your rent and utilities, debt payments, just minimum payments. And you're adding all those up, categorize them into fixed expenses. And then you're figuring out, is this below 50 to 60%? If it's in that range, great, then move on. If it's not, that might be something we want to adjust later, right? Big thing here, when you look at your credit and debit card statements, you can often search by categories, and this makes things go a lot faster. Sometimes you can categorize everything into groceries, and it'll show you Walmart, Costco, and those transactions, or you can do gas and kind of look at transportation stuff. Now, one suggestion, this can be a long process if you're doing it for the first time. And so be realistic and give yourself room and time. I would probably split this into a couple different sections, an hour and a half in one time, and then an hour and a half in the next time, because it's probably going to take you that long to pull up different statements and categorize everything. And again, if you're working with a spouse or significant other, it can definitely be frustrating for the non-nerd. And so we want to be patient, be able to pull up everything in stages. Okay. And then step three is revisiting those numbers each month and adjusting. So Devin, why don't you take us through step three?
Yeah. So revisit, readjust, realign yourselves, right? Realign your spending behaviors because, you got to pat yourself on the back getting through the first two steps. This is not easy. Anybody that's starting to do this for the first time, there's a lot of things that you got to admit, maybe I spent too much money here, and it's going to hurt a little bit. The days of acceptance is going to help you move forward and realign those spending behaviors. So step three is really sitting down with yourself and your spouse to make sure your money matches your priorities and your lifestyle. And maybe you'd rather prioritize travel over dining out or taking shorter vacations with family or friends, or maybe you just want to crush this debt faster, right? I think that's why you guys are all here. You want to crush the debt so you can get to the better portion of things of guilt-free spending, right? So really just look at what form of spending money makes you most happy and what about your spouse, and start to go from there to help realign and readjust. I know for me, staycations are a big thing. My wife enjoys doing couples activities and couples massages that build a true relationship of connection. And so when we put our money together, we are looking at, okay, Devin wants a new surfboard, but does that help us connect? Yeah, and maybe it does, right? Or does my wife want a new surfboard so she can surf with me? Yeah, maybe she does, but at least we're communicating and we're starting to put this down on a paper so we know if we have a little bit extra cash and we want to have some guilt-free spending, we know where it's going to. Josh, I'm sure you've had some areas where you've had to realign or readjust, and just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think for us, the biggest things that we decided were most important were vacations, eating out, and visited family. But when we were paying off debt, we definitely cut back a lot on eating out and on just vacations in general. But we still used 10% of our income to be able to take smaller trips and do the things we love. And guys, at the end of the day, we don't want you to feel guilty about what you've done or what you've spent. The big thing is figuring out how can you move forward? How can you continue to better your financial future now? And we want you to look back, not with guilt, but with eyes to assess and see what could you do better. I just got off with a client today. Sometimes it's how can you spend better? She was a super saver, and I was like, hey, let's figure out how you can have some more fun. What are the things that you love to do? And encouraging her to spend. And so it's not always just about cutting. It's definitely not feeling guilty, because we don't want you to feel guilty. But what we do want you to do is realize, okay, based on some ratios. What can we do and how can we succeed long-term and short-term? And so now, after all this, take a second to breathe. Those 3 huge steps are a really big part of starting your financial future. It's a lot to take in. It can be overwhelming. The big thing too, Devin and I love working with people on their money plans and helping people succeed. And if you're in healthcare or not, if you're just listening to this podcast and working through your money and you need some help walking through your money plan, go to fiscalclinician.com and book a free consult session today to figure out if one-on-one coaching could be right for you. Now, again, this process of realigning yourselves, looking back on your spending each month, is a pretty significant process. And for us, we believe that should be part of your monthly routine. My wife and I get together and meet about our money once a month. And when you start out, it's going to take a while, but as you get adjusted, it goes down. And now my wife and I's meetings are around 15 to 20 minutes a month because we looked at how did we do? Okay, did we spend way more than we're making? No. Okay, we're saving, and that's it. But initially, again, it's going to be a lot longer of a process than that. And so one thing that can help you streamline your plan, make it a little shorter, is through some apps. And now if you're just starting out and you're not wanting to spend money, there's always Excel, Google Sheets, and then there's a free version of the app EveryDollar, which is nice because this basically involves manual entry of transactions. There's a couple different ways you could do this. With EveryDollar, you could basically go in, look back at your statements like we were talking about, and just type in each transaction. That's one way to do it. Another way some people use this app in the free version is anytime they make a transaction, they'll just put it in their phone. Maybe you filled up on gas, you type in whatever, and then you fill that in. Maybe you went to eat out, so then you just type in at the end of the check, you type in your phone real quick. It is a nice way to do it for free, but my wife and I used EveryDollar Premium also for several years. We really liked it. And what's nice about it is it basically has transactions come through automatically. It connects to your debit and credit cards, and transactions come through automatically, but you still have to categorize them. So for example, a transaction for gas or Costco or whatever might come through, you still have to drag it to that category, which again, for several years was great for us. But we wanted something that was a little more automated, and that's when we started using the app Monarch. Now, Monarch, it only has a 7-day free trial, and it's normally $100 a year for their version of it. And then EveryDollar Premium is about $80 a year. And what's nice about Monarch is you can automate transactions, and so it'll automatically categorize things. If it gets it wrong, you can recategorize it. Or what's really nice is you can create basically little rules for where the money gets categorized. So for example, if you see a Hulu, transaction for your subscriptions come in every month, maybe it categorized it under miscellaneous. You can basically set a rule to say, hey, every time you see a charge for Hulu, I want you to categorize it into subscriptions. So it is a very nice way to automate your finances. And as you teach the app more and more about your finances, it's more automatic and everything just comes through, which is nice. So big picture, if you're looking for something free, Excel, Google Sheets, EveryDollar, they're all great. EveryDollar has a free version. If you're looking for something a little more robust and more automatic, then you could look into Monarch. And there's several other versions as well that you could look into.
Yeah, I like all those too, Josh. And if any of our listeners are looking for a free spreadsheet of an Excel, I can easily send a duplicate of the one that we use. I can also break it down a little bit easier for you so you can get started right away. But our takeaway is just being intentional and consistent with assessing and monitoring your budget and then looking back at it and reflecting and readjusting. So our takeaway is budgeting is not about restrictions. It's about using it as a vehicle to create the freedom and the lifestyle that you want. And the key is still to build the plan first and then use those 4 categories to provide the foundation. And then we can use the tools a little more wisely.
Well, guys, you are all smart healthcare professionals, and we all work way too hard to let our money control us. And so start with a plan, take one step today, even if it's just starting to write down your guesses of what your fixed expenses are, of what the amount of money that you make, and guessing at your expenses. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning in to our Fiscal Clinician Podcast. Until next time, keep taking steps toward financial freedom. And if you are a healthcare professional and looking for help, or maybe you have a story of how you paid off your debt, we want to hear from you. So please just subscribe, comment to our podcasts, and we hope to see you here again.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today, guys. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the Fiscal Clinician Podcast if you enjoyed it, and share it with a friend or colleague who needs some encouragement.